Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. My guest today on Sue's Healthy Minutes is Lori Morris. I actually got acquainted with Lori through an email she sent to me requesting to have me as a guest on her podcast. Through our conversation, I was convinced that she would be an equally important guest to have on my podcast, Sue's Healthy Minutes. So we did back-to-back interviews, first for her podcast and then for mine, which I will share both on Sue's Healthy Minutes. Lori is a certified nurse midwife, though currently a stay-at-home busy mom. She homeschools her kids and is the host of her own rapidly growing podcast, Your Birth, God's Way. So often I hear young moms express being so overwhelmed with just being a mom that they feel they simply do not have time to make their own bread. But Lori found the time and in her own words says that this is the best thing she's ever done for her family. I'm laughing as I start to introduce Lori because even today she's birthing cats on the back porch, juggling children, telling some to get in the shower, telling some to come in and help. So I just know that Lori's number one background as a medical professional and her story of bringing real bread to her family might bring encouragement to anyone, no matter what the reason for your busyness. So, Lori, thank you so much for joining me on Sue's Healthy Minutes, taking a little time out of your crazy day. And so, would you begin by telling us just a little bit about yourself, when and how you discovered Real Bread and Bread Beckers?
Okay. And first, thank you for having me. I am honored to be here. This is like my fangirl moment. I'm on with Sue Becker. I know I was telling my friends, I'm like, you may not know who she is, but she's like the best. So I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're very sweet.
Okay, so I'm Lori Morris. As Sue already said, I'm a certified nurse midwife. I've been a nurse and or a midwife for in the medical field for over 20 years. I'm actually also a Navy veteran, so I've got that under my belt too. I've got lots of hats that I wear. And I'm married and I have 3 children. 9, 7, and 5. And so, as she said, we're having cats right now on the back porch right outside my son's window. So there's a lot of excitement going on in our house today. I've never seen cats give birth. I've seen lots of humans give birth, but not cats. So this is a little bit of a different experience. So how did I get started with this? Well, several years ago, they say you can't post anything on Facebook that'll actually change anything. You're just fighting with people. Well, a post on Facebook is what started this journey for me. One of my midwife friends made a post about what happens to the commercial wheat crop right before harvest and how they pretty much douse it with glyphosate and all this different stuff. And I was shocked and I was like, well, what do you do? Okay. So they do that. There's no way out of that. What do you do? And she made reference to she was going to have to get back to making bread and buying grain. And I'm like, doing what? What does that even mean? And so I started doing research to find out so what's the alternative other than eating that? All you can do, you can make bread, but you're still buying the flour. What do you do? Well, that led me down the road of researching and trying to figure this whole thing out. And before too long, I came across Bread Beckers, which is only, 3.5, 4 hours from me. So I decided to go down and take one of the getting started classes. And that's where it started for me. At the time, I was pregnant with number 3. She was born in October and I went to class in June. So I don't know how many was that, 3, 4, 5 months? Homeschooler can't do math in her head. Go figure. But yeah, so I was, halfway there with her and I went down and and I've never turned back. I called my husband. Our anniversary's in July. And like I said, I went to class in June. I called him and I said, can I buy myself an anniversary present? And he said yes. And so I got the Anchorstrom mixer, which is my favorite. It is a beast. I love it. And yeah, so that's where it all started. I bought all the buckets of all the things and came home and started trying to figure it out. I had tried a little bit before that. I'd ordered some wheat through a different source, and I just couldn't get it to rise, and I couldn't get it to act right. And going to the class, it just all clicked, and I came home and I made the first beautiful sandwich loaf that looked like a real loaf of bread, but you know what I mean? Like what you expect at the store, it's what it's supposed to look like, something that your family will eat and not look at you funny. And from there, I make everything. I make rolls, I make our pancakes, waffles, you name it. I use real flour, fresh ground flour. So, you would think it would be like the worst time to start, but I've never turned back, and I just keep adding more things. Just last week, I kind of made the first tortillas that were good and edible that nobody looked at me funny for. So, you just keep learning, and it's just so doable. And back to when you said best decision, it is the best decision, I believe, for my family's health that I've made, short of a few other things that we don't do, some things I removed. Right. But as far as our nutrition, of course, I can't prove this, but my husband was diagnosed with high blood pressure when he was 17. So it's obviously some genetic element. He has, I don't think he's taken medicine in 6 months. It took a while, but he's back down to a normal blood pressure, and he's been home more through the winter because he does lawn care. So he's been eating more bread, and I think that makes a big difference. His cholesterol came down to a very normal level, and it was high. So my kids, they almost never get sick other than just sniffles. There's just so many things that I can put my finger on that this has impacted.
Wow, that's amazing. So let me ask you this, because you were pregnant with your third child, right? And You're obviously a busy mom.
Yes.
How did you incorporate this into your obviously busy lifestyle? And what made you fight any feelings of being overwhelmed to take the step? I can't tell you how often I hear, people in general, but especially young moms say, I can't do this, I was doing this before children, and now I've just had my third child or second child, and I'm just too busy, I'm just too overwhelmed. How did you fight those feelings of being overwhelmed and going, okay, great, now I'm going to start making all of my own bread, pregnant with your third child?
Well, I think because I realized the health impacts, and through that one article that I read and starting to really dig into what these chemicals are doing to our gut, of course, listening to your Truth About Wheat, once you realize those things that you're doing to your health, you have to, you can't not do it. It has to become a priority, because the alternative is turning back to the stuff that's going to make you sick eventually. So you're going to spend the time on one end or the other. So I got the tools that helped make it doable. Like I said, I got the mixer, but I also found a bread machine. I don't remember if it was, secondhand. I can't remember where I got it exactly, but so I do that some. But interestingly enough, I was kind of starting to lean on that. The bread machine is the way to go. But while I like the bread out of the bread machine, it is a little bit different. The consistency is a little bit different. It probably has to do with the kneading process. And just recently, my son mentioned that he likes it better when I do it in the mixer. Right. And so I just now, now the youngest that I was pregnant with then is 5.5. And I'll usually I've gotten to where on Monday mornings, I'll make 2 loaves, and that'll usually get us through the week. And then sometimes I'll also make, I'll add an extra for cinnamon rolls or something like that. But it was just one of these things in your head that, well, if I don't make time for this, then we're putting the things in our body that I say that I don't believe should be there. Right. So am I willing to make it happen? So, and it's not like, I don't hand knead. I use either a mixer or the bread machine. So it's, hands-on time, maybe 20 minutes total. Maybe 30 on a day that I'm doing, cinnamon rolls and all that. That takes a little bit longer, but I'm talking about from grinding the wheat to putting it in a machine, then you just kind of wait on it while you're doing other things and
Right.
you roll it out and all that. It may be 20 or 30 minutes hands-on time total, and that's really not that much. It feels like it when you say it out loud. It's like, she makes all her bread, she grinds all her wheat. But the reality is that the amount of time that it takes is really not that bad.
Right. And I found for me, with my even larger family, that having the right tools made it doable. People
Yes.
ask me all the time, how do you do this? And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm home. I'm homeschooling the kids, and we're home. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the mixer was a game changer.
Yes.
The Anchorshroom mixer, because I would put enough dough in first thing in the morning to have 6 loaves of bread. And I would do things like you. I'd make rolls out of some of the same batch of dough, sandwich bread, and then maybe cinnamon rolls or raisin bread or something like that. And we were set for several days, and I had 6 children. And so that, and I know it's an investment and people look at it, but just the testimonies of people getting well from this bread, you quit having to have so many doctor visits and medications. And like you've already said, your husband's cholesterol has come down and the blood pressure has come down. And anyway, it's just an investment to me that will pay for itself in a short amount of time. And the investment of time is actually minimal.
I remember when I came to the Getting Started class, I don't remember if it was you or your husband, but you all said about that mixer there, you were telling people, if you can't do it now, just start to save. And when you kill your other mixer, because you're going to kill it, you'll be ready for this. And then the part that stuck with me too about why this is a good investment, you said you won't be giving this to your children. You'll still be using it when they're out of the house. You might give it to your grandchildren, maybe, right. But you were just talking about how that machine is so well made, and it's not like your typical quote investment that then dies on you in 2 years. I've been using it regularly for 6 years now, or 5.5 years now, and it's still going strong. And I know you said in that class you were still using one that was 25 years old or something.
My original. Yep, it's still the same one. What's the word I'm looking for, with envy on the colors that we now have, because mine's this gray, kind of. But anyway, I love it. It's still, the mill is the most valuable appliance in my house. I still am using the same one that I've used for 20, probably 6, 7 years now, and the mixer the same. So, and they have been the most life-changing, important investments that I ever made. Kind of like you just said, the number one best thing I've ever done for my family's health and nutrition. So you mentioned your husband's cholesterol and blood pressure, and your kids not having as many snotty noses and things like that. Anything else? Any other noticeable differences that you saw that make you, believe this is the number one best thing you've ever done?
Well, even the things you don't see, I just know when there's so much nutrition in there, and you go through what nutrients are actually there, and you don't have to be shoving, artificial vitamins and things down their throats. That alone, you just know the building blocks. My kids are some of the biggest, and I don't mean like big around, like they are a head taller than most of their friends. And one of the things I thought about, I mentioned this to you the other day. You talked about in one of your podcasts the other day about how your kids that you had after you started this seemed stronger. Uh-huh. And I thought back again. I started this. I was about halfway along with Abby, my youngest, and I remember we would hold her up at like a month old, and she would plank. Like you would hold her up in the air, like belly down. And she would hold her body like a board when you would do that. And she was standing up on your lap, at a month old. Yeah. And I'm like, this kid is an Amazon. Like, how is she so strong? And it never dawned on me till just in the last few months. I was like, you know what? I wonder if that's the difference. Of course, I can't prove it for sure. But she was just so strong and so tough. And again, my kids, they're built. Now, I know there's a lot of genetics to it, but they are just stout. You know what I mean? There's strength to them. They're not puny. They're not overweight. They're just, my 9-year-old is up to my chin and is over 100 pounds, but he's not like obese. He's just stout. And I don't know that that's the difference. I can't, again, prove that that's the difference. But the difference in the way that they look health-wise, they just have this healthy look to them. We don't ever have, the rashes and the lesions and all the different, things.
So many. experiencing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just so many things like that. And I mean, there's a lot of things that we do different. You know, we live out in the country. They're running around outside barefoot. There's a lot of things that we do different. So it's very hard. It's hard. It's not a controlled experiment. You know, we can't identify what variable it is, but I just know, if nothing else, God gave this to us as food. That and another thing, I've learned so much from you. Jesus would not have compared himself to bread if bread makes you sick. It is a good thing, and it was given to him. If we use it in the form he gave it to us, that is. Now, if you take it through man-made processes, then you ruin it. But when you give it to when you use it the way he gave it to us, as close as you possibly can, then you reap all those benefits. And he told us that he's the bread of life. So that means that bread's not a bad thing. And for us to assume that is, I mean, this isn't, we're not going to dig into faith too much, but my goodness, where's your faith? God told you this is good. So find how to make it good.
And you know, I'm finding that among Christians that kind of have bought into the anti-grain, anti-gluten thing, that's what's kind of bringing them back around to start questioning all of that. Because, I mean, face it, information on the internet and out there, we've just been flooded with that. And just like you, they start going, wait a minute, if Jesus compared himself to bread, what's going on here? But, you know, getting to your kids, their muscular strength and just their stamina and just their stoutness, as you call it. I love that. I think it's more than just coincidental, because I've heard this from other moms who, like you, have noticed the same things in their babies. And I, too, had that exact same experience. My two younger children, number 6 and number 7, they were both born after we started milling and making bread. And my other kids, yes, genetics, plays a part. But I noticed that same thing. My youngest child actually lifted her head and made eye contact with me within minutes after her birth.
Goodness.
Didn't have the typical wobbly head. And it was interesting in my research, because of the bread, I started researching everything about it. I learned the importance of vitamin E in protecting the integrity of every cell in our body, including our muscle cells. And the vitamin E prevents them from breaking down so readily. Therefore, it improves our muscle strength and even that of newborns. And I'll never forget reading this in some of my research. It said when pregnant women are supplied with adequate vitamin E, their newborn babies will in turn have adequate vitamin E, and even from birth will have noticeably better muscle strength and not the wobbly heads that we have come to just accept as normal. And I noticed that with my two youngest children. My older children were healthy and strong, but they still had the wobbly heads and weren't as strong, noticeably muscularly as strong as my older kids. And it said, that kids that have adequate vitamin E will tend to sit up sooner, as well as crawl and walk at a younger age. So wheat, and particularly wheat germ and wheat germ oil, is one of the richest food sources of vitamin E, which is of course is lost, like you said, when the germ and oil are removed from commercially milled flour. So real bread made from freshly milled flour does provide this vitamin E. And I love it. What a delicious way to get this nutrient. So I think you're right. We don't have absolute proof to say, oh, it's not just in genetics, but it's happened too many times. And I've heard the same words from so many people to say this can't just be coincidental.
Right.
So, yeah. So as a nurse midwife, now you've seen lots of pregnant women and worked with lots of them. What do you see as one of the greatest needs of pregnant women in regards to their nutrition and pregnancy?
One of the biggest questions that I either get asked or I see them, on Facebook groups, is everybody looking for what prenatal vitamin do you use, and that's whole food source or whole food based, and that it's very hard to find, because most of the things you find in the stores are very highly synthetically processed. And so lots of moms are taking all these supplements that everybody tells them that they need to take, and they're probably not even working, if we're just being honest, because their body doesn't know what to do with them. They're not real. And so we just see so many things happening, so many issues like preeclampsia, like preterm birth, so many things that ought to be getting better that aren't. They're actually getting worse. And we're so, highly technological. We've got all these things, and yet we're not getting better from it. And so there's a source, and there's one common source. Of course, there's a lot of different sources, but one source we can really look at across our population is the lack of real food and nutrition in that food because of the way it's grown. It's stripped, and the things that God meant to be there aren't there. They're grown on stripped soil that has very little nutrition in them, and then doused with chemicals to kill weeds, but then doused with more chemicals to try to fertilize. And it's just this constant chasing your tail to try to make food good, and yet it's not. And so the thing that I see coming from bread more than pretty much any other source is that you're actually getting real nutrition that your body knows what to do with. It knows how to use it. And like you said a minute ago, it's delicious. Like, why would you want to chew on a chalky vitamin?
Yeah.
When you can have good, real food that is nourishing and enjoyable and has in it so much of what you need. There's so much you really need to supplement. Everybody's scared that, bread's going to make you fat. When you eat it the right way with the right fats and the right things in it, it doesn't, and it nourishes you. And the days, kids are still kids. They go to grandma's house, they go all the different places, and they don't always get good food everywhere they go. But I feel like a day that I've gotten at least one meal with real bread in them, I know they're doing better than 95% of the population, and they've gotten some good nutrition, and it just makes you feel good. And other issues that we haven't dealt with. I've never had a constipated child.
Yes.
We've never had those days of sitting in the bathroom crying together because we just can't go.
Right.
And none of those things have ever happened for us at all. And I just, again, is it coincidence? Probably not, because most people most people are like, what do I give my kid? I need them. They won't go. They can't go. It hurts, all this different stuff. We've never dealt with any of those issues because we're getting all that we need out of this bread.
Right. And that's a bigger problem among children than I think most people realize. I mean, I've had customers come to me and just thank me for teaching about the bread and constipation. And some neighbor shared with them a loaf of bread, and now their 4-year-old, who they took to the doctor, and his answer was just laxatives, which long term is not a great thing. And, when she questioned me, goes, I have thousands of kids on this. So I don't think we realize that there's a much simpler answer, and it's to go back and eat real food. And grains are one of the most nutrient-dense foods God has given us. And I'm a huge advocate of eating fresh fruits and vegetables. But even those, over time, every day they're stored, and now we ship in fruits and vegetables from all over. You can't really know that you're getting all the great nutrients that should be there. But
right.
They're storable. They're left whole and intact. They're going to give you all the nutritional benefits that your body needs, as long as they're left whole and intact. And then you mill it fresh when you're ready to use it. So. Yeah.
One thing I just thought of, my grandmother, she lived to be 94, and she passed away probably a year or so before I started doing this. And she had diverticulitis, and she had lived on milk and magnesia because that's just what they did for years and years and years. Yeah. And I just wish, I wonder what it would have done for her, because she struggled so much, and all her doctors ever tried to get her to take was something out of a bottle. Right. And nobody ever said anything about things like whole grains and the benefits of them. And it makes me wonder, because then you fast forward, and there's a mom at church who had a 2-year-old. And she posted on Facebook just this plea of, what am I supposed to do? She won't go. She's in tears and whatever. And I was like, I'll bring you some muffins to church tonight. And I did. And then she's like, it worked. I'm like, yeah, it did. Now when are you going to buy your meal? I don't make anything from this. I'm telling you though, you need a meal. You need to do this. And so, it proves itself over and over again. And there's so many things we deal with in our culture that I truly believe stem directly from the emptiness of our food supply.
Yes, and particularly the alteration and the total, what's the word I'm looking for? Unwholesomeness of the bread that's in the store. The alteration, removing the bran and germ and all the fiber and vitamins and minerals that are lost by taking that out, me has been one of the worst things done to our food in the history of mankind. And the health of America has been declining ever since. And so often we don't trace it to that. And I think the encouraging thing to me, to moms, well, I think pregnant women struggle with constipation and things like that. And that is one thing that doesn't have to be. And bread is a delicious solution to that problem. And it's not just an old person's problem, like we said, and not just anecdotal. And that's our number one testimony is, wow, this changed everything. So anyway, and I know, getting back to getting the nutrition that you need during pregnancy or any time, I know that the doctor that I used for all of my children, he used nurse midwives, and so midwife delivered all of my babies, different ones. He had several that rotated around, but I remember they had been with me, from the first child to the seventh, and biological child. And when I started milling my own grain and making my own bread, it was a real big thing then for them to put you on folic acid supplements because folic acid had been directly related, or a deficiency in folic acid directly related to problems with births and birth defects. And I remember my nurse midwife saying, you don't need to go on supplemental folic acid. You're already getting it from the bread you're eating.
I was just reading about that yesterday because, again, as you mentioned earlier, we're doing an interview for my podcast as well. And I was thinking about all the midline defects we have, which are things like, spina bifida, obviously, but other smaller things like the tongue ties. Everybody's got tongue ties now. You hear this all the time. It's like the buzzword. And that's a midline defect. And that stems from folic acid and folate, and getting it in the wrong form. And everybody tends to think it just has to do with something called MTHFR, which is just a genetic issue that's not applicable to this show. But it's beyond that. It's more people than just have that. And I really believe it's because they're not getting the folic acid in the right form, again, that their body knows what to do with so that it can be properly used.
Exactly.
And there's just example after example of things that we're just not getting, because even if, the internet tells you that, like you said, fruits and vegetables are supposed to have this much of vitamin A and this much vitamin C. Yeah, ideally. But is that really what's there anymore when it's been grown in such the opposite of natural? You know what I mean? There's just so many things. And I'm glad you brought up that folic acid, because I believe that moms, just by having that alone, the supplements that you're taking, your body's not absorbing them properly. It's doing you no good. And there's some thought that taking it in the wrong form might actually be blocking the natural uptake of it, from your foods and things, so that it's causing some kind of a conflict there, which is actually making the situation worse.
Yes.
So if you can get the folate from your food, then obviously, again, anytime you get something in its natural form, your body knows what to do with it because God made your body to use it.
Yes. And we're going to talk in more detail on your interview with me, and I'm going to go over the history of white flour and the enrichment process, but that is so true. And, for the 35 to 40 nutrients that are lost when they take out the bran and germ and the wheat germ oil and virtually leave protein and starch. Protein and starches that we need, but that's all white flour basically is. But we've lost all the vitamins and minerals. But then they only put 5 back in, 4 B vitamins and iron, folic acid coming on later. They started making them add that to the enrichment. But like you said, those are forms that our bodies don't necessarily synthesize very well because they're synthetic. And one thing that I learned that's so important is B vitamins. It's a huge family. It's a huge complex of vitamins. There's over 17 that I know of. And taking one without the others actually causes you to be deficient in the others. It upsets that perfect balance. And that's what they've done to our bread. They removed who knows how many and put a few back in, and supposedly it cleared up X, Y, and Z diseases, but did it really, or has it now caused a whole host of other problems? So anyway, it can spiral really out of control pretty quickly. So anyway, well, I tell you, I've just loved talking to you, and I just think you're so encouraging. That's what inspired me to have you on Sue's Healthy Minutes is because I wanted you to show young moms particularly, but everyone, all of us say, oh, I'm too busy to do this. But I think it just encourages everyone to say, you can do this no matter how busy your lifestyle is. So I want to ask you as we close up this interview, what final word of encouragement could you give, like I said, not to just pregnant women or busy moms, but to all of us that feel overwhelmed by the busyness of life? I find testimonies to be almost like a gift, and the final words like the bow on the gift. So how would you like to wrap up this gift, per se, and just what would be your last word of encouragement that you would like to share here today?
Okay, well, there's two things I wanted to kind of add in, and they do tie into your question, and then I'll tie it up, as you said, at the end. First thing, we as moms have this natural drive to protect our families and to make sure that we have everything we need. You know, if there's something missing in the pantry, you automatically think it's your fault. You know, that's my job. But my job is to make sure that we have what we need. Well, we live in a time when things are happening that we really don't remember seeing in our history. Things are, maybe the supply chain is falling apart. Maybe a factory is burning down. You know, I don't want to go into all of that, but there comes a point where we can't be guaranteed that you can just go to the store every day. And the beautiful thing that I realized maybe 2 years ago is I have become a prepper without meaning to, because I have a basement full of all these different grains that are shelf stable. And I have tins of olive oil, which are shelf stable. And I have honey, which is shelf stable. And so I have all the things that I need to make the food when I need it, rather than having it in a perishable form. And so that's the security of knowing that, and I know that things can happen even to that, but knowing that God has given us the means to have what we need in our food and preparing for what food we might not be able to get later. We have it in a way that's not going to go bad. And that is so reassuring. Yes. Like I said, you don't have to go buy buckets of emergency preparedness food.
Right.
You have grains, and if you really want to get down to it, if you've got grains and oil and water, it's not going to be the tastiest, but you can make it happen. You can live.
Yes.
And I mean, I guess if you really want to get down to it, you wouldn't even have to have the oil. You could make it work with just boiling them. So just knowing that you have the food there if it all falls apart. That's thing one. Yes. Thing two is back to the baby that was in my tummy when I started all this. It made me grin this morning as I go into the kitchen. I'm going to a homeschool conference starting tomorrow. And so I made a double batch of muffins so that breakfast was here. My husband wouldn't have to fix stuff, you know, all that. And I can't go into the kitchen and make anything without Abby, the little one, wanting to come help me. And there she stands mixing up the batter, which she almost did entirely by herself, just had to scrape the bottom just a little bit. I mean, the one who was there for the whole process, she loves it and she wants to help. And so you're teaching your kids lessons that are going to last them well past your years. And it's also going to teach them that, again, the store is not where our food comes from. That's, you know, like you actually can make things. You can actually, you know, love your family through providing them good food, and it's fun and it's very tasty. I mean, she was licking the batter bowl, and she's like, I wish I had a whole bowl of this. I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's not a good idea, but okay. But they just love it. And that, you know, in our generation, nobody knows how to make anything. And when your kids see you making such a staple of your nutrition, they want to be a part of it, and it will change generation after generation after generation, because it puts something in their head that you can't put there just by teaching. You know, as they say, more is caught than taught. Yeah, you know, they know this matters. So my word of encouragement would just be to, you know, we have time in life for the things that are important to us. There are so many, you know, if you put like one of those apps on your phone and you track how much time you're actually spending on your phone doing things that are meaningless, the minutes are there. I know we're busy. I know there's this and that and the other and everything that's so keeps our schedules too overfilled. And that's a whole nother topic of maybe that's not what we should be doing, but different story for another day. But this is one that you need to put first. And if you're out the door at 7:00, then put everything in the bread machine the night before and set it to start at 4 a.m. and you have fresh bread when you get up and your house smells awesome.
It does. Yes.
Or dump it all in before you leave for work, and then it's ready when you get home that night, if that's the way that you have to go. But there are ways to make it happen. Making a batch of muffins, 5 minutes maybe. I mean, it doesn't take long. And bread, as you say, bread is not just in a loaf form. When we're getting the nutrition, you can get it in your pancakes, you can get it in your muffins, in your tortillas, or wherever. There's so many different things you can do with it, according to what your family likes. And like even with the muffins, I made a double batch. I did the first half plain because that's how some like it. And then I dumped the blueberries in for the second half. So we had 2 different kinds of muffins for the next maybe 3 or 4 days in maybe 5 or 10 minutes. So it is doable. You just have to prioritize, and it's worth it to not, it's such a helpless feeling when your babies are sick. And if you can remove some of that sickness to where instead of once a month, it's just every 3 months that you're dealing with something, is it not worth that time? Wow. There's nothing more important than giving our babies what they actually need, not what the world says they need, but what they actually need. And it's just rewarding and it's fulfilling. And it's just so worth it.
Yes, it is. It is. And I just love, what really pricked me. One of the things is, how much time, and I know I do it. Some days when I'm tired, I'll just sit down and I'll kind of scroll through my Facebook, just looking. And the next thing I know, an hour has passed, or even an hour and a half. So that was an hour and a half that I could have easily made bread or something, And a lot of times, even when I'm having to rush out the door to go to work or an interview or whatever, or an appointment, sometimes I'll run in there, 5 minutes, I mix up a batch of muffins, pop them in the oven, come get my shower. By the time I'm out of the shower, they're done, So it really is easy, to work into your busy schedule. And I just thank you for encouraging that, other people, that you can do this. And I just, if they could have only heard the beginning of our interview of, okay, and go, watching the kittens be born. Yeah. I think they would have all appreciated that, actually. But then one other thing about prepping and being prepared, I totally agree. The things that have been in the news, and we don't know where our food supply is it going to always be there? And we saw that even during COVID, milk and eggs and meat, was not always readily available. But if I have a bucket of wheat and some oil and honey, I can make most anything. Or even if I don't have the oil and honey, I can boil it. Right. But prepping, this really hit me just a couple of weeks ago. Being prepared is not just storing food, but it's going ahead and starting now to get our bodies as healthy and strong as they possibly can be. Just like with being pregnant, you don't want to start eating healthy. Well, you do if you've not been eating healthy.
Right.
Sometimes be the encouragement to do that, but really you want to start now. You want to start before you're ever pregnant. And that's the way, start now. Get your body as healthy and strong as it can be today. And so that is as much a part of being prepared, I think, as storing the food. Sometimes I hear people storing food. I'm saving this. I'm like, no, start now. Start eating that now. And, Jesus compared himself to bread. And he said, I am the real bread of life. He who comes to me shall be satisfied. The bread is satisfying, it's nourishing, and it's filling. And then he also, when he said, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that goes forth from the mouth of God. That is absolutely correct. But it reiterates that grains, wheat, bread, and, barley, the grains that they used of his day, the people knew what he was talking about. And he was basically saying, you think because you have bread that's all you need because it can sustain you physically. Bread can sustain our physical life, but we need Jesus, the real bread of life, to sustain our spiritual life and to lead and guide us. So I just thank you so much for taking the time to share your heart and your message. And I just felt like with your medical background and all that you've seen, that this was a real testimony that I believe will encourage so many people. And like I said, whether a pregnant mom, a busy mom, or any of us that just find ourselves overwhelmed, you can do this and it's so worth it.
I hope so. And I hope that if any of you are expecting, my whole goal is just to bring people back to God, just to stop thinking of you got everything in the world and then you've got God.
Yeah.
It goes together. And this is just one element of that. And that's what I talk about in my birth podcast, Your Birth God's Way, is just focusing on Him and how He has given us what we need. But we have to get our focus off of looking for our answers out in the world and start looking to Him for our answers. And this is just, one of the biggest ways.
Yes. Well, I do want to promote your podcast, Your Birth God's Way with Lori Morris. I just think, check it out. Like I said, whether you're pregnant or a busy mom, I think she's got a lot to say. And so I just thank you again, Lori, for sharing your heart and your message. And thank you, everyone who's listening today. And until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.